This is Saturn, girl, and I'm tripping out on these transits right now. Why? Well, let me tell you. We've got some wacky stuff going on. On February 28th, our soggy Sun in Pisces, along with Mercury, our non-binary neighbor, and Saturn, my malevolent matriarch, will all convene in a crazy conjunction between 9 and 10 degrees Pisces. Let's look at the fun chart, shall we? Here we go. This is today, the 26th. And we've got Saturn and the Sun and Mercury all close together. And then, boom! Look, they're all conjunct and Mercury's just leapt ahead. You see, Saturn has been lurking in Pisces since March of last year. And remember, I refer to Saturn as feminine, so please don't try to get confused, okay? The Sun came into Pisces on February the 18th, and Mercury on the 23rd. But what does this even mean? Well, to find out, we're going to have to look at how Saturn-Sun conjunctions have expressed in the past and in natal charts. Then we're going to talk about what this means for you and do your horoscopes for the occasion. First, I want to talk about cycles. No, not my hormonal cycle. We're talking about synodic cycles. But what is a synodic cycle? Well, a synodic cycle is the time it takes a planet to return to a conjunction with the sun. That is, the duration between conjunctions. I've done previous videos on the symbolism of synodic cycles, in particular Venus and Mars, and now it's time for Saturn. You might be wondering why we're not doing Mercury cycle, but don't worry. We're going to talk more about them and the role that they're playing in this fun little transit a bit later. But this is all quite important because it represents the close of a cycle and the beginning of a new one. The journey of a planet, in this case Saturn, from one conjunction with the sun to another, tells us a story that can symbolically teach us something about the unfoldment of our own lives and consciousness. But what is that story? Basically, I relate key points in the myth of Saturn's Greek precursor, known as Cronus, to the various phases or stages of the synodic cycle, which I lovingly refer to as the fall. In this case, we're dividing the synodic cycle up into 6 distinct phases. Now, Cronus is referred to as male in the myth, so that's how we'll refer to him here. The first phase we have is the conjunction between the Sun and Saturn. This is the beginning of the cycle to me and represents the birth of Cronus to his mother Gaia, the earth goddess, and his father Uranus, the sky god. After Cronus' birth, Uranus is warned that his son will one day overthrow him. Second, we have the morning star phase, where Saturn rises just before the sun. I liken this to Cronus overthrowing his father, Uranus. He even took his sickle or scythe or whatever it is, you know, that hooked thingy that he's always sort of, the reaper tool, right? And he apparently removed his father's. Of course, they landed in the ocean and mixed with the sea foam to give birth to my mama, Aphrodite, also known as Venus. And Cronus became king of the Titans and ruled over the world during the Golden Age, in which peace and prosperity reigned supreme. Third, we have what's called the retrograde station. This is when Saturn separates to about a trine from the sun and appears to move retrograde, that is, backwards through the zodiac. For more information about retrogrades, please see my other videos. To me, this phase represents a reversal, when Cronus is told that his son will overthrow him, just as he did to his own father. In order to avoid it, though, Cronus starts to devour his children as they're born to his wife Rhea. Next, we have the opposition, meaning that Saturn and the Sun are opposite in the zodiac. I think of this as symbolic of Cronus' son Zeus being born. His wife Rhea tricks him by taking a rock and wrapping it in the swaddling clothes so that he devours the rock rather than Zeus. After that, we get what's called the direct station, when Saturn gets to about a trine with the sun in the opposite direction and appears to end his retrograde motion and turn direct again. I connect this phase with Zeus overthrowing Cronus, and this ends the Golden Age. Of course, Zeus becomes king of the gods, ushering in the sick and depraved world we now live in. And finally, we have what's called the evening star phase, when Saturn can be seen setting just after the sun in the west. I think of this as representing Cronus's banishment to the Tartarus, the torturous abyss, and the torment of the Titans. Of course, the cycle begins anew with the conjunction and the birth of Kronos once again. Although, in one version of the myth, Cronus is reconciled to his son Zeus. And to me, that symbolism tracks a bit more with the Synodic cycle. But I also liken the Saturn cycle to the biblical fall of man or humanity, which was basically the fall of Adam and Eve during the golden age of the Garden of Eden, into the world of good and evil and suffering. It's like the story of the prodigal son. We leave our father's home in search of our fortune. We squander our inheritance on all sorts of nasty things. And we fall from grace. But that fall makes us aware of that journey represented for us in the movement of the sun over the course of a year. To me, it's becoming aware of the duality in ourselves and reconciling the pairs of opposites of consciousness and body, soul and form, spirit and matter. Even the word yoga is Sanskrit for union. The word religion in English comes from the Latin, religare, to bind together again. We have this whole theme of wholeness through resolving the pairs of opposites. This is such an interesting cycle because the Sun and Saturn have had an adversarial relationship with each other for a long time. In many cultures, Saturn was the furthest visible object and seen as the natural opponent of the sun and the moon, the two lights or luminaries. They were assigned rulership over the two hottest and brightest months of the year in the northern hemisphere, right? Leo and Cancer. While Saturn was assigned rulership over the two opposite signs, Capricorn and Aquarius, the coldest and darkest months of the year. In Egyptian mythology, she was known as Apep, the serpent of primordial chaos, who fought Ra, the sun god, as he set in the west and entered the realm of darkness, only to become reborn again at dawn. In Indian mythology, she was known as Yama, lord of time and death, who was also a child of Surya, the sun god, who charioted the sun across the sky. Surya was also recognized as the embodiment of light and truth. And Yama was pitted against him in an eternal struggle. The medieval poet Kabir, who wrote the epic, The Ocean of Love, likened Yama to the demiurge, or false creator of the material realm, who devoured souls in order to keep them imprisoned in the cycle of death and rebirth, rather than let them reunite with their source, also known as Satpurish in the epic. Similar to other synodic cycles, we can look at this as the triumph of light and truth, that is, the soul or the spiritual nature, over desire, deception, and the material nature. To learn more about the symbolism of the sun and its annual journey, please see my other videos about the solstices and equinoxes. But how does this express in real life? Well, firstly, the sun ruled authority, judgment, revelation, perception, and divination. You see, from the sun's lofty position high in the sky, he was able to see further than anyone else. It gave him the gift of long-ranged sight. And the sun reveals things. Saturn, on the other hand, challenges authority and usurps it. She also represents the long protracted struggles, isolation, imprisonment, sadness, grief, melancholy, and even deceit. When these two meet in a conjunction, we see world events involving challenges to established authority, exposing deceit, and some big court decisions. For example, we had this transit in February of last year, 2023, when Nikki Haley announced her candidacy for president for the Republican primary. She essentially challenged the stranglehold that Donald Trump has had on the Republican Party. Of course, it has not amounted to anything. But it's interesting that her presidential campaign started while the Sun was conjunct Saturn. And I predict it will end soon, probably during this conjunction, and probably just after she loses the Michigan primary. In fact, we do often see a cycle of events begin under one of these conjunctions and end at a later one. An example of this is Alexei Navalny, the Russian political activist who became famous for his opposition to Vladimir Putin and political corruption in Russia. Interestingly enough, Vladimir Putin has his Sun conjunct Saturn in Libra. But after surviving an assassination attempt, Navalny returned to Russia in January of 2021 when the Sun was conjunct Saturn. He was immediately arrested and imprisoned. During his time in prison, though, it appears as though he was slowly poisoned over time. A very Saturnian fate. He just passed away on February the 16th, as the Sun was once again approaching a conjunction with Saturn. But in this Navalny-Putin saga, we can clearly see the themes of challenging power and exposing deceit and corruption in the slow and torturous assassination of a political opponent, in this case of Putin. This time around, I think we're going to see more of a focus on exposing corruption, especially in the Supreme Court, because more news has been coming out about these people effectively accepting what look like bribes. But what does this look like in a birth chart? Some words that come immediately to mind are austerity, discipline, and self-control. Like the first thing I think of with this placement is people with RBF, resting face. I had a friend with this placement many years ago who had a pretty bad drinking problem. They would black out and get violent. So one day they just decided that they would never drink again. And boom, done. They never did. Arnold Schwarzenegger has this conjunction, and discipline has been a fixture in his life, whether it's bodybuilding, nutrition, or building his business. The famous rapper 50 Cent has this too. Remember he did that song, Many Men? That's one of my favorite songs. Many men wish death upon me, lot of mice and dog and I can't see. I'm trying to be what I'm destined to be. Those lyrics are super Sun-Saturn energy. But homie was shot 9 times, including in the face, and still bounced back, becoming a very successful businessman. Aside from self-control, we also see types who are obsessed with controlling others. Like, I think of micromanagers and Karens. It's like, my way or the highway. I don't agree with your lifestyle, so I'm gonna try and make it illegal. As I said, Vladimir Putin has this. And I mean, he's made it pretty clear that he wants to bring as much territory under Russian control as he can in order to restore the former glory of the Russian Empire. He's also tried to stamp out the LGBTQ community in Russia every chance he's gotten. Then we also see people who challenge traditional power and authority. For example, Ulysses S. Grant, who was the famous Civil War general for the Union and later became president. He's remembered for fighting vociferously for the rights of Black people and to his opposition to both the Ku Klux Klan and religious indoctrination of children in schools. His progressive positions put him at odds with many of the entrenched political powers at the time. We also see mental health challenges like depression and body dysmorphia. I see these natives struggle with confidence and self-esteem. This can be due to many reasons, but it often has to do with the appearance. These people are hypercritical of themselves and often suffer from a lot of negative self-talk. There's a feeling of being ugly. I think of the famous and gorgeous actress from the movie Kill Bill, Uma Thurman. Some jerk told her when she was 10 years old that she needed a nose job, and it really affected her. I mean, that's a screwed up thing to tell a child. But she struggled with her own sense of beauty and confidence for most of her life. But it also partly gave her the strength to be a political advocate and activist for both women's rights and the LGBTQ community. She's also a brilliant example of challenging conventional authority. But what does this mean for you? Well, as I said earlier, Saturn has already been in Pisces for nearly a year. You've already been feeling fear, frustration, resentment, or restraint in whatever house Pisces is for you. But you see, this has been the backdrop of your life for a while now, just about a year, and we stopped noticing it, sort of like being a fish in water. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, the sun entering in brings back conscious awareness of your troubles or your dissatisfaction with the current situation, while Mercury brings in inspiration and new ideas regarding what you can do about it. This sudden exposure, though, makes us want to control or suppress these feelings of dissatisfaction. So we're all going to feel a little Putin-ish, meaning we're all going to want to be in charge. You'll be attached to your expectations and run the risk of being a Karen. Like, take it easy on service staff, please. You don't want to be that bitch who calls 911 at a drive-thru window because someone put fries on your burger. It's like, Fritz, you idiot, I didn't ask for a bologna sandwich, I asked for an abalone sandwich. Having expectations is human, but you're going to have a bad time with this transit if you're too rigid. Allow yourself to be a little flexible. Sun-Saturn placements often isolate themselves inadvertently, and you don't want to lose support because you're being too demanding. And remember, this transit exposes deceit, so if you've had hidden motives, then count on them being exposed. This is a great reminder to check yourself. Like, ask yourself, would you be proud enough of your choices to have them plastered all over the news and social media? No. Well, then you should probably reevaluate them. But in order to see how this affects you personally, we need to do your horoscopes. As I always say, these are for each rising sign. But if you don't know your rising sign, you can watch for your sun sign. But let's go to the fun chart, shall we? So we're starting off here with Aries Rising, which means Pisces is your 12th house of isolation and mental health. So you're becoming aware of feelings of inadequacy or self-degradation. This can be constructive, but the Sun and Saturn here are reminding you that you can't just force yourself out of destructive patterns. It reminds me a bit of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was founded while Saturn was in Pisces in the 1930s. Their approach had more to do with recognizing our powerlessness rather than forcing our desires into submission, which we know doesn't work. If you try and rigidly control yourself, eventually the pendulum will swing in the other direction, and you'll go back to the licentiousness you were trying to avoid. But what about Taurus Rising? So for our Taurus Rising homies, Pisces is their 11th house of hopes and friends. So you're becoming aware of feelings of hopelessness and rejection, most likely. You may get ideas of things that you would like to do, or perhaps new aspirations. But then the self-defeatist talk comes in, like, oh, you could never do that. Or don't waste your time. It's like you want to ignore your desire for more. The sun is exposing these thought patterns in order to remind you that dismissing your drive to develop is like spiritual death. Just like St. Paul said, where there is no vision, the people perish. So cultivate a vision of where you want to go and who you want to be. But what about Gemini Rising? Our Gemini Rising homies? This puts Pisces in your 10th house of life direction, and you're becoming aware of feeling adrift and regretting your chosen path. You're likely feeling dissatisfied with your present accomplishments, and Mercury is showing you new alternative directions that you could go. You may want to suppress these feelings because they're too darn inconvenient. Like, it's hard to change direction, isn't it? But if you avoid the pull towards a new career or whatever it is, the sense of depression and emptiness will only get worse. The only cure for these feelings is accomplishment. But what about Cancer Rising? Our Cancer Rising homies. Pisces is your 9th house of beliefs, and you're becoming aware that what you once believed no longer serves you, that your worldview is no longer becoming of the person you're becoming. It's likely that you've been attracted to different worldviews, and Mercury's been presenting you with new possibilities, but you've likely gotten attached to old patterns of thinking that don't even belong to you. You see, we acquire these through our life conditioning, like from our parents, our friends, from school, or TV commercials. But if you allow yourself to listen to other people's worldviews, you'll understand yourself and others much better. But what about Leo Rising or Leo Rising homies? This puts Pisces in your 8th house of death and debt, and you're becoming aware of having to deal with loss and having to let things go. It's most likely financial, but probably also involves feelings that you've likely suppressed. And as they come up, you find that you have to process them and let them go. Mercury brings memories, and we often cringe at things that we've done and said. But we have to allow ourselves to feel these hurts in order to process them. This transit is about learning to forgive. But the most important person to forgive is yourself. And when you forgive someone else, it's still more for you than it is for them, because you're releasing them and you from an emotional debt. You're freeing yourself from owing and being owed. Alternatively, if you're in a relationship, this could be when you start commingling your money with your partner. But be careful, because this can be quite dicey, as I'm sure you're aware. What about Virgo Rising homies? So for Virgo Rising, Pisces is your 7th house, you see, of partnerships. So you're either becoming aware of growing distance between you and your partner, or a budding new commitment. Some people break up, and some people get married or move in together during these transits. Either way, though, you've likely been feeling more independent. So the idea of commitment can be scary. Mercury can show you the practical side of this, though. You're probably quite anxious about the idea of losing your freedom or taking on new responsibilities. But the key here is to be honest about your emotions and maintain healthy boundaries so that you don't get swallowed whole. Like I am. In a good way. What about Libra Rising? So for our Libra Rising friends, this puts Pisces in the 6th house of health and obligations. So this is really the responsibility transit. You're becoming aware of the stuff in life that you've been avoiding. This is the house of regular maintenance. It's the stuff that falls apart when you don't take care of it. You know, like our bodies, our work, and our commitments. Mercury here, though, gives us the desire to organize and prioritize, like making lists. The key here, though, is to not get overwhelmed. Realizing how much you need to do can be terrifying, but you can't get it all done right away. Just like you can't eat an elephant in one bite. But if you chew little bits at a time, well, hopefully you can finish the whole thing until it rots into carrion, but that's another story. What about Scorpio Rising? I met a Scorpio Rising person who I think is the bee's knees, the cat's pajamas, right? But this puts Pisces in the 5th house of children and pleasure. So if you're a parent, you're becoming aware of a persistent or even perhaps painful issue with one of your children. Perhaps they're being bullied or ostracized. Alternatively, though, this feels like life gets chaotic and nothing really feels quite pleasurable. This transit often feels like life loses its flavor, or like it's impossible to enjoy yourself. It's like having to put out lots of small fires. Mercury brings new ideas, though, about how to enjoy yourself. I find that engaging in creative pursuits is the most effective way to restore our attention and allow us to be in the moment rather than charge off in our heads, worrying about things that aren't in our control. The key thing here is to let things happen spontaneously and to attend to them as they arise. But what about Sagimattarius Rising? So for Sagittarius Rising, Pisces is your 4th house of home and parents and private life. So you're becoming aware of restraints with your living situation. Perhaps your home needs major maintenance, or you've been roped into a living situation that you can't easily get out of. Saturn here, though, makes us feel displaced, or like we're not at home. Someone maybe intrudes into your space, or you feel like a stranger in your own home. Mercury, though, helps us to see different sides of these issues and allow us to consider creative solutions. Alternatively, though, your parents could be facing health issues, or something unresolved from your past is coming up again, and it will likely have to do with your parents. But what about Capricorn Rising? You see, Pisces is your 3rd house of siblings, media, and community. So you're probably becoming aware that you've lost your voice. No, I don't mean like Ariel in The Little Mermaid, like, ah. I mean, you could probably do with a little silence. Someone famously once said that it's better to be silent and thought a fool than to open one's mouth and remove all doubt. But I totally disagree with this. How else would you learn if you don't make mistakes? This transit, though, instigates anxiety or fear of speaking up and sharing your ideas. But Mercury is stimulating your speech here, and you're probably still holding yourself back. The important thing, though, is to practice being direct with people. It's hard, I know, but facing your fears of having difficult conversations and standing up for yourself are what actually give you confidence. What about Aquarius Rising? That's me and my homies. You see, Pisces is our 2nd house of money. So we're becoming more aware of ways that we've been irresponsible with our finances, aren't we? We're starting to get anxious about our money situation. But Mercury prompts us to take stock of our resources and learn how to save and be frugal. If you have a small business, like me, this also indicates needing to put extra effort and work into building up your enterprise. This requires what? Managing your resources, creating invoices or profit loss statements, which I still really need to do. The important thing here is to plan rather than stress, because the stress doesn't help, and it paralyzes us from acting. The stress comes from what? Primarily uncertainty. So taking inventory of your resources is the perfect recipe for relief. But what about Pisces Rising? Well, for you, Pisces is your 1st house of self, duh. So you're becoming aware of things about yourself that you've either suppressed or avoided. Oftentimes, health issues or illnesses come up during this transit too. It may feel like you're losing your mind a little bit, and you may have been morbidly focused on your own mortality. But Mercury here is helping you to try on different hats and allow yourself to be more flexible with yourself. You're probably realizing that you kept yourself sealed in a box of your own expectations, and that was draining you. This transit, on the other hand, helps us to live more authentically, or it makes us suffer if we don't. But I hope all that's useful for you. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and also please click the bell when you subscribe so that you get notified when my new videos drop. And my videos are the best. Please consider also donating through YouTube. We have super thanks available, or through my Patreon. in order to help me continue making such wonderful content. All my info is below in the description. I'm very cute, very funny, and I know my stuff. I also do the best readings. You can book through my website, frankielynch.com, or you can see all my contact information below in the description. But most importantly, I love you. You're beautiful. And have a spectacular, whatever it is you're having.